welcome to our webinar. Just letting people in here, giving everyone a minute. So yeah, we have Adam Schuler on here today. Adam, if you want to introduce yourself a bit, or do we have a slide for that? And then if everyone wants to sort of type in the chat where you're from, what you're hoping to learn today, and is this your first time attending one of our webinars? So you can just message that in the chat.
All right, folks. I'm Adam Schuler. I'm the chief pilot at Gemini, and we're going to talk about some of the pile burning program we've been doing for the last few years here, and just to inform you guys a little bit on what we're doing and the capabilities, what we can do for the forestry industry here. The debris disposal, we've been working on this for a few years from the helicopter point of view. A few different ways we're doing it is just moving people in and out of cut blocks to burn it. And then we also developed a torch that works really well down to about -30. And that was a previous problem before, is torches wouldn't work, light these piles, and snow was the other issue. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we're doing with the torches, and as we go on here, cost effectiveness of it. So Gemini Helicopters, we're a small company based out of Grand Prairie. We just have 4 machines, 2 A-Stars, 2 EC-135s, and all of us have been flying here for upwards of 20 years each. So I'm the highest time guy, about 11,000 hours. So over this, we have, so 5+ years for developing just this torch. And we also we're looking at a couple different models, and we're constantly revising what we're doing with the torches. And we're finding another version we're actually working on a prototype right now to work in deeper snow conditions. Because what we're finding is snow, anything over about 18 inches is starting to be a problem for 2 reasons. One, to get the proper gel down into the brush piles through a thick layer of snow. We found a way to get that around, but once it gets over 18 inches, 2 feet, what happens is the snow sloughs in on the holes we make in the snow, and it can put out the fire. So usually our limits are, right now, I will say anything over 2 feet of snow, it's not a consistent at this point. And it's also, you get pretty poor burns because the edges of the piles are always stuck in the snow. And when we burn it, we'll burn it from the center out. And when it burns, you got this perfectly burnt center section of the burn pile, but then you have a ring of debris around the outside. And it makes a real pain if you got to replant that. Planters have a tough time getting into this ring of logs and debris left on the burn pile. So that's sort of the upper limits of what we're looking at for the torch. And honestly, the ground guys, when you're burning it on the ground, we're finding the same thing. It's you're always left with a ring of debris around the outside of the piles. So we try to do it as early as we can, early winter. And if it's a really heavy snowfall year, it might come down to the piles just might not burn. And it doesn't matter if we do it from the air or the ground, it's the same results from both of them. So a lot of the techniques we've tried lighting from the sides, from the bottom of the piles. And the way we do it now is consistently, we start right in the middle of the pile. Our gel, and with the correct consistency of gel, it works really good that it burns from the top down, makes a chimney in the pile, and then burns from the center of the pile out. So you got a lot of heat coming up right away. And actually, with lighter snow conditions, like anything under 2 feet, it will melt that snow off and get a nice clean burn around the outside. So that's gives you an idea for how we do it. And on the next part, I'll just show a couple videos. And the first one is from the Alberta government with the regular torch. And this is in cold weather. And their biggest problem is they cannot get a consistent light So it sort of shows you what they're doing with it. Minus 15, which is actually not all that cold. We're usually working in 15 to 25. Our cutoff for flying is about 30 degrees, minus 30. But on here, they Alberta Forestry did a bunch of tests with all different conditions, different fuels, different gel mixes. And this is their regular standard torch they're using for forestry. And as you can see on the video, it just does not light. So they that's one of the problems we did overcome with here. And this was this was done many years ago, and they've still used the same torch to this day. But of course, when Alberta Forestry uses it, it's mostly summertime, plus 20, plus 30 conditions. So it lights off consistently, and here it is not. Okay, just try to get the screen off here. Brandon, you might have to replay that one.
I hit an escape.
Yep. And then next part is, this is our burning program here. And this was a few years ago. I was using a Jet Ranger, and low snow conditions, everything. This was almost perfect conditions. Could have used a little bit more snow around the burn piles, but there was no winds, as you can see from the smoke, and all these piles just burnt up quick. So as you see, it's just a quick over the top of the pile and light them off. When we got snow, it takes a few seconds more because I have to find a proper area in the pile to light it from. But it sort of gives you an idea how fast this the piles do light up. And then, yeah, then once they're lit, typically it's no problem for them to burn up completely. The picture in the background, you'll see where there's a little bit of snow around, and just enough to keep the grass fires from going. And that works about the best. So this torch works, like I mentioned before. We modified it to work ideally in the cold conditions. And from testing, it's very effective. And this is a view from a video I did a few years ago. And it just shows the torch head, the piles, and the work, essentially how I'm going about burning this pile. So the block flying over here, that's all lit up in minutes. So I'm doing about a pile every 30 seconds, and these are in snow conditions. So usually something like this, just find a little hole in the snow, very precise with the end of the torch, so I know exactly where I can put it. You can put the torch in the hole in the snow from the top down. Uses about a half a liter of fuel per shot, and that's enough to light it up. This little half liter of fuel, of gelled fuel, will burn up to 15 minutes. And here's another one. Just a second here. And just off on the small screen, you'll see is just a time lapse from pile to pile, and then over the next hour, the pile is just burnt completely. Now, here's where the heli burn is. We'll talk about this, the efficiency and productivity. This really makes a big deal when you have a limited window for burning, especially when it comes to BC, where you got venting conditions. Our efficiency on this is, it depends on a few factors. Like we have, as I mentioned before, with the amount of snow we have, how it's piled. I have had people, like some operators, if they're piling in the piles with a cat, which is very rare now, they just sort of pushes up the edges. It's really hard to burn those because they push a lot of snow and dirt in. Typically a nice beehive style that's piled up with an excavator. The higher tall piles, they burn really good in this method because we start from the center of the pile. It burns out, gets really hot. And wind, a slight wind is also good because it actually feeds the fuel. And the snow, ideally a couple 3 inches on the ground just to keep any fires from around. Now the other thing is, because we are in the air and flying over these piles, like once we light, I will do a lap around the pile, around the cut block again, and check on the progress of the piles. If any don't light up, I can quickly go within 30-40 seconds and relight that pile again. And also can look for any spotting from piles. Like if we have a lot of debris in there and it embers off, can attack that right away. We could get personnel on the ground, or quite possibly, like I'll have a water bucket with me, but with winter conditions, we would just have to chop hole in the ice and we can put out a fire if we need to. So there is the opportunity to prevent fires from spreading beyond where we need to. Now, the productivity on these, when we're burning, we are looking, the barrel we're using is 200 liters is what we're doing in a mix of gelled fuel. And that 200 liters will last us about 2 hours, which is what we call a cycle. So usually 2 hours of fuel. We're using the A-Stars now for burning with this. So we're getting a full 2.5 hours of cycle time. And with that one barrel, we'll light anywhere from 200 to 400 piles. We use a little bit more fuel, gelled fuel, if there's high snow conditions, because we have to essentially burn through the snow with one shot and then give it another shot to get the fuel down into the pile. So we average about half a liter per pile. So with 200 liters, you're looking at 400 piles. And as mentioned, 2 hours for a cycle, 2 hours, 400 piles. So ground crews, typically 2 guys, they will burn 100 to 200 piles per day. So we can do what it takes the ground crew all day. It'll take us 1 hour. And the other thing is we don't have to worry about roads or access. We have, as long as we have access for our vehicle, like, because we need a support vehicle behind us. And that vehicle can be anywhere 15, 20 miles away. And it supplies fuel for the helicopter and brings the gelled fuel out too. So we don't have to get that close. We can go across rivers, whatever's the closest place to put a road or the accessible road for that vehicle. And then we could just do a landing spot. I've used just leases or side of the road, a pull out of the side of the road. I don't need much room to land the helicopter. As long as the vehicle is able to park off to the side, out of the way of the road, we can use those areas for staging areas from and get cut blocks that are close. So if road access or even road access or on the other side of rivers, other side of lakes, we can just go fly across instead of putting a road in or trying to get somewhere to just snowmobile or quad into those areas. So that sort of gives you an idea of where we can get to and the efficiency. So when it comes down to it, a big program, say 5,000 hectares of land in brush piles, will probably take us 5 days. So that's if you want to break it down per pile, that gives you a sort of an idea. And now cost on productivity, we are typically bill just for the helicopter time, but we worked it out. On average, it works out to about $20 a pile to do the burning pile with the A-Star. And the A-Star gives us a large margin of safety for power wise, because I was doing this with the Jet Ranger, and the Jet Ranger is a little bit slower. It's less money per hour, but it's also we're also at 100% power for the first hour of doing this job. There's not much margin for error, so it comes down to a safety factor. And the Jet Ranger is not an efficient machine anymore. The maintenance cost is skyrocketed, and it's not economically viable to run the Jet Ranger anymore. So that's why we switched to A-Stars, and it's viable to run, and we do have a larger safety factor with it. Like, we're not pulling full power all the time to do this job when we are running low level in the trees, like in the cut blocks all the time. It is nice to have that little bit extra power from a pilot's perspective. And yeah, I'll just pass this on to Brandon for the next part. He's going to talk about the venting conditions in BC.
Yeah, before I do that, just wanted to ask if anyone has any questions so far for Adam on what he's gone over. We like to keep these as interactive as possible. So if anyone on here wants to unmute yourself and ask a question or type it in your chat, I can read it to them. Feel free to do that now. We'll give a few seconds for that. And yeah, if it don't have anything right now, feel free to type it in the chat at any time and I can ask Adam or see if I can answer it myself. So yeah, thank you all for hopping on here. I'm going to touch on venting conditions in British Columbia. So this is on the screen here is a map of a specific day for venting conditions in BC. So what you'll see is that the blue, the light blue, is, if you look at the legend there, it says you can burn in those areas on those days, and then the red would be no burning, and the I guess the greenish blue color there is that burning's permitted for 1 day. Is there a link to the map there, Adam?
Yes.
You can go ahead and click that.
Actually, okay.
I thought there was, but maybe there's not. So we could check out what it's doing there today. But basically, the concept is if you want to follow the rules without special permission, you need to make sure that you look at this map every morning before you head out, and it basically tells you if you can work or not work in regards to pile burning. So a few years back, we were doing Fortech was doing a bunch of burning in British Columbia, and we had a lot of challenges with this. Later it gets in the year, the worse the venting conditions typically are. So one thing about pile burning is that in general, it's very weather dependent. You need to make sure that the winds aren't too much, that you're not going to risk having a forest fire, and that you have enough snow and all the things that come with making sure that you're working safe. And then when you throw in venting, which is basically, from my understanding, how the smoke's going to sit in the valleys and stuff like that. So if there's a chance that it could possibly smoke out a highway or something, then it'll basically say no burning permitted for that day. So you can see there on the red, this must be today. There's no burning allowed around the Prince George area, Quesnel, Williams Lake, 100 Mile House, some stuff over in the northeast I noticed there. So as the winter progresses and smoke hangs in the air a lot more, there tends to be a lot more no burn days. So one thing that we were thinking that may be beneficial for some companies that operate in British Columbia would be that if we could come in and burn in one day what might take 4 or 5 people 10 days to burn, that we would be able to get it done in that day. I think a lot of the forest companies in British Columbia have been struggling with either getting their piles burnt by the end of the season or getting them burnt soon enough that they're not worried about holdover and stuff like that. So we could probably come in and finish up a program in a few good venting days, which I think would be a good opportunity for forest companies to make sure they don't end up in out of compliance with government. So that's about all that I had for venting conditions in British Columbia. Was there any more other slides after that on this, Adam?
Yeah, there's we got a couple here, but while we're talking about venting, so as you can see, if you can see my cursor, so on the west side of Williston Lake, for example, like to drive up here, it's a long drive just to get from, say, Mackenzie up to Germanson. You're going to be looking at all day, and staying around Germanson, that gets very marginally unless you stay in a logging camp. But something like that, we could stage out of Mackenzie, and we could hop across the lake, be in this whole area within an hour, and start burning the areas. So same thing with, like, say, for example, out of Chetwynd, there's a lot of access in that area, but to drive there, you're looking at, you either got to get up really early to get a few hours of drive time in to get to the spots, but by air, anything in the mountains is usually really close, like Chetwynd to even to Mackenzie in that area, we're looking at a half-hour flight time. Anywhere between that is under that flight time. So within 20, 30 minutes, we are actually in the block burning. Now, the other restriction we have would be daytime. We can only fly daytime hours for this type of work. So with daytime and looking at November and December, it is getting rather short. So you only have about, on average, 8 hours of work time, but we can utilize that 8 hours really efficiently. And in 8 hours, we can still do up to 800 to 1,000 piles a day. So that sort of gives you an idea on that one.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adam. Did anyone have any questions regarding the venting conditions or anything? We can go back to the slide there, Adam, if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, Brandon, maybe just one question. Have you guys had experience with basically like the dispersed piles? So, like a quarter of the size piles and time, 5 times the amount, and is logged out in the cut block, and then due to fire hazard, it gets piled and burned out on the dispersed areas.
Yeah, I've had some experience with the ground crews, but let's maybe have Adam talk about helicopter.
Yeah, so in the air, like on those ones, we have done some of that. As long as it's piled decently, it's usually not an issue. Yeah. So
same for the guy on the ground.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no.
Thanks. Snow levels too, right? If the snow levels aren't too high yet, they should be not a problem. But if you start getting a foot of snow on a 2 foot high pile, it could be a challenge.
Okay. Okay, we'll just leave it on venting conditions for a bit here. Okay, and just try to think what the next part is here.
Yeah, you go back to the slides there, Adam, if you want.
Yep, just trying to back out here. That's an issue.
By clicking the tab there for the PowerPoint to the left of the tab that you're on.
Okay, just hang on. Okay. All right. So that covers venting conditions. So as I mentioned, with daylight hours, snow conditions, those are the things that could stop us. Daylight hours, we're pretty ready to go as soon as daybreak starts. And from there, it's other thing, winds. Every different area's got different wind conditions. Anything, we're typically limited to what you guys can burn at. So if you've got your own specific conditions for wind maximums and minimums, that's what we'll go with. So I'd like to see a little bit of wind, ideally up to 20K. And if there's lots of snow, wind is usually not a problem, because actually the more snow we have, the more wind is better. But we still got to go by whatever the mill parameters are. And about the roads, we don't have to worry about roads as much. We just need, now the thing is, the further away we can go, further away, it just comes down to there's going to be less productivity. So if it is 30, 40 miles away, okay, now we're going to be flying for 15, 20 minutes to get to the block and burn. But in the long run, if it means not going in there with a vehicle down a road, it'll probably, if there's spot piles in multiple different blocks, like just to clean up blocks that haven't been burned, like you'll have, say 5% of your piles didn't burn 1 year. We can go in and hit them quickly, burn them, and just go on to the next block. So it doesn't have to be full block burns. It could be just smaller, because it is really time consuming for people to go in on the ground, find these piles, especially if there's lots of little fingers in the block. That's what usually gets left. People can't see it from the ground and they get missed. From the air, we see them all. So that's where that's really effective to clean up all the piles also. So for mapping, what do you like to see? Everybody's using them on Avenza. We put it into our iPad on the machine. And with that, I can see the block boundaries, and everything within block boundaries, you just light up and burn. If there's anything not within it, usually whoever our representative is, let us know if we can work with it. We can work with any kind of maps. So simple as a PDF map. We can use ARC files if needed to. Whatever format the mills typically use, we can be adaptable. And I'll throw it up on an iPad inside the machine. And with that, we can definitely get all the areas covered. And if you guys, on the picture there, that's our newer aircraft. That's EC-135. We can use this for burning. It is slightly more than the A-Star, but this is a twin engine Category A aircraft that it's slightly more expensive, but it is, from a pilot's point of view, much safer. It's twin engine capability, especially when you're sitting there hovering all the time. We'd never have to worry about any kind of mechanical issue, because this thing, it's got dual systems for everything. Dead man's curve, or height velocity curve. It is meant to fly with in the area where other machines could have issues. But these are fairly new machines, new to Canada. There's only 11 of them in Canada right now. and we're the first ones to do all of this type of work with it. But it just comes down to cost, and so far right now, but if safety is an issue, the EC135, that's our next step. So just talk about a little bit more of what we do. So we do a lot of forestry, fighting fires. I just spent the last month BC fighting fires and some oil and gas work. So as you see, this is the torch hangs underneath the machine. It's usually on a shorter line, but we specialize in a lot of long line moving loads. To give you an idea, this year we moved probably about 4 million seedlings by air with the helicopters, and various other jobs with it. So, and the other thing is we do lots of wildlife. So that comes down from surveys to wildlife control, tourism flights, medevacs if needed. All our helicopters are set up for medevac also, and mining support, and if needed to, search and rescue is also out there. So if you want to get in touch with any of us, there's our information. And we have a couple social media, Instagram and Facebook. Our Facebook has just got up and going, so it's fairly new to the system yet. So we'll get a little bit more up there. But if you want any more information, there's also an information link on our website at geminiheli.ca. But that's the general part of it. So if you have any questions, just let us know.